Hey, welcome back everyone. So in this one, I'm going to do some rendering for you. So I had some questions about rendering, and I'll do some that's off the arm, some that's on. I just figured it needed to be something that I could relate some basic forms to, and then we'll do some more abstract versions. But I'll start with what I think most people wonder about, and that's cross-hatching. And so there's so many different ways to look at this, but I'll just give you my particular favorite approach, I guess. So for me, I tend to think about sculpting the line, and you see I'm doing multiple pulls here, right? There's times I try to do one single pull. I'm not as good at it. I feel like I got a little bit more control doing this like stutter step kind of thing. And I'm also trying to curve the lines a little bit. You don't really necessarily have to. I've seen styles where they're more straight. It can work. Again, there's so many variables. I would think the main thing is to not confine yourself with things have to look a certain way. And but there are certain things that are going to yield you better results. So I will talk about that, obviously. So now I'm turning the screen, which obviously you could just turn your hand or paper or whatever. And I'm going for a little bit of a 45. Now I've seen people get pretty specific with this angling, and they're probably much better at it than I am, where they understand the diamonds and the tones that they're creating. So if you notice, there's like these little diamond shapes. See them right? There's a good row of them right there. So I think a lot of people get really good at paying attention to that. Me, not so much. I look at probably a little bit more of the tone, and then I'm probably just not as acutely aware of it. And so there is that other level of maybe, I don't know if you'd call that creative intelligence or observational intelligence or something that certain inkers have. I don't really think I have that. I mean, I try these different little angles, but I see other people do it and it's like, okay, they have a better plan than I do. And they're more focused. Something's going on there. I don't know what it is. But, you can mess around with these different variations of angles. And I always like, for another level of detail, I like going back with just a little bit of whiteout. It doesn't show as much right here. But see that? That can yield another. To me, what that's doing is essentially softening the technique. And then I like a lot of like bounce light effects. So if you notice, I put this big shadow through the middle of this form, but then on this other side, you'll see me do this a lot where I like to render away from this a little bit differently than the other side. And to me, that's where light is going to come up, or color. I guess light is color, but it's going to come up and bounce off this part of the arm. I guess I'm rendering this part. It should always come off the shadow side. But I do typically try to render that a little bit differently so that it reads a little different. I can still cross-hatch it, but whatever I decide to do, I'm going to try to keep a consistent look over here on these areas, and then a very different look, or at least a little bit different look on these other areas. And so the way I've heard this referred to as, and this can apply to rendering clothing, skin, metal, all the different surfaces, right? I can't remember what inker I heard say this, but it sort of rang true in my mind, like, oh, that's the word I've been looking for. And it's delineating the surfaces. And I think that's a good way to put it. Like, I've always thought that in my head, I just didn't know really what word to articulate it with. And so essentially, I'm always looking to separate surfaces with different rendering effects. And like I just mentioned, even one side versus another with the way that it's lit, I think about it in that regard as well. But I think about it more so when it comes to, okay, if I'm rendering a break texture, I obviously don't want that the same as anatomy, right? I want that delineated effect, that separation of tones and textures. So here I'm bringing the rendering lines on the angle a bit further out, mainly because I wanted to reshape this area. I felt like the shadow needed to come out further. So I could probably extend one or both of those angled lines. So you just come back and find them, pick them back up. All right, I don't think you got to be too critical about it. Yeah, I'm getting a little bump there, but I don't think anybody will notice that. Hopefully not. Then again, on this side, I'm going to go with this angle more noticeably. And I'm also going a little bit thicker from the shadow and then widening out just a little bit as I get away from it. Not much, but hopefully just enough to notice. And I'm also thinning the line as I get away from it. That's another one. So you could go back and thicken up the first initial lines towards the shadow side, and you just get this sort of like fading off in the distance effect. All right, so that's another way to think about the rendering. So it's thick to thin, it's fading off into a particular direction. Obviously, all of it is just this way to incorporate tone and value and softening up edges. So with this spot, I could go, well, if they're thicker where they meet the shadow and then they taper off and they get thinner as they reach towards the light, then that, and I'm actually going against the form a little bit here, but I'll go back in the other direction. I should be able to sort of fix that. But that's another thing. You'll see a lot of artists that are very guided with the form. So they're very specific about the underlying form. Like I talk a lot on this channel about wrapping lines and cross contour lines, right? And those are meant to go with the form, the underlying form. And then when you do that right, you get a very dimensional looking, whatever it is you're doing. So the same thing applies with the rendering, is that if you go consistently, so what I mean is there's some artists, they go very specifically around the forms. So test that as well. I'm not as concise in that regard, but I don't know. I feel like it still works. I guess a lot of any of this is like what works for you and what feels comfortable. But there's always those parts where you're like, oh no, I've been doing it wrong for so long, and I finally broke out of this bad habit. So there is that. Like, I don't ever want people to think that I've got it all figured out, because I look back retrospectively at my work and I go, whoa, I totally shifted what I used to call the norm in my work. And I think that's something that just naturally happens the more you do of it. So yeah, there is that, like some sort of paradigm shift, like I thought one way and believed one way, saw it one way, and then all of a sudden it all changed. So I feel like there needs to be a little shadow in there. But see, I'm not actually liking this area, but sometimes I will just keep rendering and see what I can find. I mean, it's digital, I can always go back, but yeah, I like that better. I feel like it was just too much in the light for what I was perceiving that to be. And so I'll do, let's see, what else? Maybe down here where, okay, another thing is going into a specific area with a goal, right? Like not just rendering sporadically wherever and getting lost in it, I guess. So my goal in this area is to make sure that all this has a tonal value to it. So it's none of it is going to be clear white unless I go back and I do a little bit of white out, or you'll be the separations of the rendering, but it's all going to have one major tone first, and then I'll crosshatch over it. So let me show you what I mean. So the first set of lines is going to be like this. And I will address it because I think someone's going to probably ask, well, how do you get your lines clean? And there is a lot of like finessing and practicing and straight filling up pages with rendering, even abstractly, I guess all of it, just lots of hand mechanic work, doing it over and over and over relentlessly. I mean, that is the biggest part. So, because I always have people that ask that, like, I can't get my lines clean, and what do I got to do? It just means you got to do a lot more of it. And I'm sorry that that's the answer, but it really is. Again, you can go back to my older work. I couldn't do lines like I do now. Like, go back 10-year increments, and you'll probably see a pretty big difference in the way that I was able to render. And I know that's disheartening to a lot of people, but that's the flat out truth, is that that's just what it takes. You just don't get good overnight. But there's a lot of upside to that, and that is your competition has to go through that as well. So there you go. Are you in it to win it? I guess is the main thing you got to ask yourself. Are you in it to win it? I know that's like probably a 90s term at this point, but hey, I love it. I still like that one. All right, so there's that, and then I'd probably still do a little bit of cross-hatching. All right, here's another thing. I better explain this as I'm doing it. I don't want to just leave you hanging as I'm in my brain box here just doing the thing. So I don't mind that rendering right there, but it's too even. It's almost like it's no longer an arm to me. It looks like an inanimate object of some kind. So I just feel like it needs to be rounded and feel a little more organic. And so I'm just going to add a little bit of rendering to the sides, mainly this back side, maybe another little bit right here, just a little bit different angle. And all I'm doing is trying to introduce a little bit of variation. Another way, if this was a thing that I wanted to look this way, I could cut back into it like this, for instance. This isn't probably what I'm going to leave, but I'm just trying to show you ways that you would break up something that looks too robotic, too stiff, and you'd add just little bits of variation. I actually don't mind that. I'm going to leave it. So same thing here. Maybe a little bit of bounce light that goes back into this part of the wrist. And also bumps in the shadows. Like you can add little, again, I don't know if this will work, but I'm just going to show you what I mean. A little bit of bumps here and there to make it look and feel more organic versus too stiff and lifeless. I don't know. So there's things like that to consider. I'll probably go to about right before I added those bumps. I didn't like those. Remember too, you can add negative little renderings. I love that effect. I love that ability to do that. It does a lot more for the work than you would imagine. It's just fun and easy to do. Okay, so now what else? I'm trying to think of some other things. I'll show you something cool that I would like to do here. Is so just these tiny little lines. Now another thing to consider too is that the thinner the lines, the smaller the lines, the lighter the gradient. So you get that variation that you can really introduce to your work, where you have a lot of tiny little lines, some texture, some thicker lines. Yeah, but I like these like little fine lines through areas like that. And then I can come back with just a little bit of white out here and pick up these nice little elbow wrinkles that we all love on our bodies. Everybody loves a good elbow wrinkle, right? Just something else to make it look a little more organic and lifelike. I don't know, I like those little wrinkles. And obviously you can do that with clothing. It's pretty effective. And then the other thing to consider is that when it's a shorter, smaller area, you can just get away with like these little like bumps, these rendering bumps, because you're essentially trying to convey that the shadow is smaller because this overall form is smaller. Again, everything about considering the underlying form. I don't need rendering to go all the way over it. Now here I went all the way over it because I was trying to show that that's completely in shadow, or not entirely in a dark shadow, but a little bit of shadow. That's why there's that gradient there. But maybe here I don't want so much of that. And again, I can pick up a little bit of rendering off to the one side if I don't want it to look too even, which I don't. I would rather that it looks like it's bowed out just a bit. And so to me, that does that. Those two little bits of rendering give the feeling that there's a little bit of light hitting it, obviously, but then it's not hitting it as much as it blends into the other forms and shadows to the top and bottom, or, this side and this side. So just little things like that. So Now, something more abstract. I'll just show you, let's see, what other techniques can I show you? I mean, I could render the rest of this, but it's just really more of the same. And I want to make sure to give you different things to try here. So another one, and I know I've mentioned this before, but I'll just say it again, is that you can do a lot with sort of like a bumpy style as well. So if you're not ready to do what you perceive as clean lines, be aware that you can do some pretty neat stuff with these more sporadic ones. It doesn't need to be clean to be rendering. You can do so much with just this right here, and this will like sort of free up your mind a little bit to say, I don't have to make perfect lines. You can also do shapes in the next pattern. So for instance, if I go around this spherically, I can create basically like a negative shape right there. See that curve right there? And so I think that's helpful to do for a lot of things. And then you can go in more than just two directions. You can go 3, 4, 5. I think 5 is probably the most I ever see people do, but maybe not. Some people just keep going crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I think that works, right? And then again, go back with a little bit of negative lines through here. So that's another little like abstract sort of practice you can do where it's not based upon anything, an underlying form. Good for backgrounds. Another one is where you're just more forgiving with the process and you're not trying to get perfect lines as far as in succession. You see it's much faster. Same thing, I'll space them out just a little bit, but again, I'm not going for perfect line making here. There's a lot of freedom in this because it's so much faster. Still a nice gradient. Still go back and do some, it's tighter too, so if you did like some negative, like randomized marks through it, textures and sprayed ink, right? You're gonna see it more in something like that. I'll make it bigger so you can see it better. But this is a good background effect as well. Let's see what else. Let's try some like little half moon shapes and then turn them. See what we get here. So I'd really recommend just doodling, doing stuff like this. I probably should have started here first because it's a little more fun. It's a great way to warm up. And remember, you can save all this stuff, right? Even if you're working traditionally, scan it, save it as a file, build that folder with a bunch of cool textures and patterns, and whenever you get stuck, just go back to it and be like, oh, I got all these. Yeah, I remember I did that one. That was pretty cool. What was I thinking? I'll do that again. It's your stuff, man. Recycle. Save the planet. All right, so this is just more of a tone, but again, this stuff is pretty handy to do and to have. Chances are you'll land on something that you can use somewhere. I really shouldn't be pulling back so far. It's like one of the things about when you're working digitally, it's like you got to sort of stay around the same size of the screen, or your lines are going to immediately feel different. Because if I'm tighter like this, but then I pull back like this, well, I just change the hand mechanics considerably, even if I don't move my hand any differently. It's just based upon the zooming in, zooming out aspect of it. So, gotta be careful of that. Okay, so there's another one. And again, this would probably be another good one for doing a negative effect through. So let's try that. I'll duplicate that, bring it over. And so you could probably do all sorts of fun stuff in here. I don't know if basic lines would do it. Let's try another organic, or so, let's try sprayed ink. Where's one of those? I got like these little dot brushes, just like, yeah, like that. Probably a little smaller. No, probably a little bigger. Forgive me. But yeah, I mean, if there was a lot of that going on and then darker at the base, then you could probably make this work really well. Like, so you want it pretty dark. I'm just gonna copy it and make it really dense. Where's that down? And then, yeah, so then those little dots would show up a little more. Not as well as I hoped, but you get the idea. Hopefully, is it the dots are another good one. I guess we could just throw in some ink splats. And by the way, I got free brushes. I think this is part of my free set. Yeah, RAM inking free set. There you go. And I did not even mean to promote that to you folks. It just happened. But yeah, anyways, they're free. Make sure they're linked in the description box below. Whoa. And then you can get some of the patterns that I just pre-made like this. And you could practice creating your own and share them, whatever you want to do. Because again, freebies. But a lot of this stuff is just more of the same, and then lots of practice, lots of variation, and you'll get it. It just takes time. It takes patience, practice. It takes experimentation is the big one. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. I'd love to know what you think. More on the way soon. Good luck with the art, and bye for now.